Welcome to Podcast Awesome, where we chat about icons, design, tech, business, and nerdery with members of the Font Awesome team. And occasionally these days we've been talking to non-font awesomers too, so that's been really fun. My coworker Zach Leatherman introduced me recently to Dave Darnes, who is a design system aficionado of sorts and an all-around web wizard who's been in this industry for a while. Dave wrote a really interesting article about job titles in the dev and design world, specifically the title design engineer. So is that title just like a fancy way of saying somebody who does a little bit of everything? We talk with Dave a little bit about where design engineers fit into the tech world, whether titles even really matter, and a little bit about why calling yourself a Rockstar Ninja Unicorn isn't the best career advice in today's climate. Zach Leatherman is co-hosting today, so there's another first, which has been really fun. But enough of me blabbing. You want to hear from Dave, so let's get into it. Welcome, Dave Darnes! David Darnes. Dave, I think you like to go by Dave, yes?
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. And you are in a different time zone, so you're maybe starting to get a little bit sleepy. It's probably dinner time for you, right?
It is dinner time for me,
Yeah.
and I had a bit of a rough night with two varying ill children, so
Yeah.
I'll deal with it. I'm a
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah. All right. Just pound some more coffee. We'll be good. Dave, I noticed Zach shared your website with me, and I love that little there's a little speaker icon, and you had your friends and colleagues kind of call out your name, which I thought was hilarious, like David Darnes. And so I'm hoping, if we would be so lucky to be able to kind of do our own version of that, if you're willing, of course.
Hit me with it.
Yeah. And I know Zach, like, let me tell you, he is quite, he's quite the karaoke king. I mean,
okay.
we did a team outing last time we met up, and he was rocking it. He did a rendition of I Did It My Way that was, I mean, he had everybody going. It was fantastic. So Zach, I kind of feel like you're gonna have a good David Darnes call out. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I think I do have a David Darnes call out on the website live.
Oh, nice.
You do,
nice.
you do have one, and it's fun. I feel like it was deliberately phonetically like back to front, like to get to complement everyone else's like audio style. Most of them are my dad, because that is the origin. It's his fault. But there's other people like he's the OG, and then everyone else is just trying to emulate that. But Zach did it his way.
I don't even. Oh wow, that was
that
was an incredible segue.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Wow, you have some clear podcast hosting experience under your belt right now. I genuinely don't remember how it sounded. I haven't gone out and listened to it lately, so I'll do a new one, and it will maybe be the same or maybe be different. I don't know, but we'll just do it right now. Ready? David Darnes.
Oh man, you kind of you stole my vibe, Zach. I was gonna go
Z it out.
Yeah, well, no, I was gonna kind of do like a cheesy radio announcer one, and you just stole my thunder, man.
I mean, you have a very good radio voice. I will tell you that.
Thank you.
So just one up me. It's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. David Darnes. How's that?
Wow. The reverb there was incredible.
Yeah.
Great acoustics in your room.
Yeah. We're doing a soccer / football version. It's a goal. It's a goal. We just made a goal. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep, I love it.
Well, of course, Dave, I don't expect that you would put that on the site, but I would be so honored if you did.
Oh, it's going on the site. Absolutely.
Okay. No pressure. Also, you are the very first Podcast Awesome guest that is not a font awesomer. So
Oh wow, I didn't realize. Oh,
yeah,
cool. Thank you very much.
we're trying to break into that and have folks from our industry and design and tech to come on. And there's a lot of folks out there that have interesting things to say that are sort of in our space. And Zach identified you as the very top person we should talk to. So yeah, we're
Number one.
Wow. Honored.
yeah. And you wrote an article that you passed on, and I'm the title is escaping me right now, but it's basically geared towards what is a design engineer in the industry, in the biz. There's um, a lot of ridiculous job titles out there, and maybe some confusion, or like, is design engineer, does that even make sense for what it truly is? What is it that sparked this article for you to write about this?
Design engineer has kind of been a culmination of like two aspects: being a designer and being an engineer. In an ideal world, we would all be builders or creators, and
Yeah,
like because
right.
of that ambiguity or people's desire to not be ambiguous,
Yeah.
we end up with these kinds of titles.
hmm And actually, maybe to back up, but for someone who maybe doesn't even know what we're talking about, even though these titles are somewhat arbitrary, what is a design engineer? Like, how would you explain it to a non-technical, non-design type person?
Right. So in our context of our web development and application development, you have typically two sides of the coin. It's like one side is the design part, creating the UI, the user experience, how it looks, how it feels, and all that kind of stuff. And then oddly on the other side, you have an engineer who is like how it's made, how it's put together, and that. And I'm trying quite hard not to like say the same things because there
Sure.
is tons of overlap.
Yeah.
And so this role is kind of right in the middle of that that person who has an eye and an experience for design and how UI gets put together, but also has the ability to then code that UI together and build that kind of stuff.
hmm
And they can be born from like either side. Like they can come from like any angle. They don't have to be exclusively on either side, which kind of goes into this kind of ambiguity kind of area. But like that's the kind of thing. Someone who has the ability to straddle both sides of that
hmm
work.
hmm
Like prior to writing it, I was like, I want to be a design engineer. I want to be that person. And
Yeah.
I've spoke to other people that want to be that person. And then when I actually got into it, I'm like, well, the title kind of, I'm not too bothered about the title. It's the what that entails is like what I'm more like focused on. And like,
Mm.
like if I'm a front end engineer that gets to have a say and like a contribution in the design aspect, then like check, boxes are ticked, and like I'm quite content with that. And like I would like to think that other people would be in the same boat, like maybe sometimes like seniority kind of comes into it, but that's a whole other thing, like level of experience and like having that reflected in your title and like position and stuff. But yeah, that's a whole
hmm
other thing.
Are there any noteworthy or really ridiculous job titles that you came across?
N- No, I don't think there wasn't any like ridiculous ones. There was interesting points that like design engineer exists in other disciplines entirely, like in like structural engineering, and like there's even
Mm-hmm.
at the university near where I live, they have a design engineer course, and that course is like structural engineering or like
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I can't really argue at that point either. Like that's
Right.
not wrong. Like if anything, it might be more accurate. Like being
Mm-hmm.
like it's more engineering. Like
Right.
engineering, as far as I can tell, like was almost adopted into like development and like code. But like then again, I didn't do a software engineering degree. I did a interactive design degree, so I
Mm-hmm.
I can't really comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering if there was some goofy stuff out there, and I'm sure there is. There's always like I don't know, like where some of these ridiculous titles you come up with, and it's always like a such
Yeah.
and such ninja or a unicorn or a rock star.
Do you know what? You've reminded me now. A couple of people said Rockstar designer
Yeah.
and like ninja and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
back in the time when we were using a lot more textures and grunge,
Right.
I'm curious if you think that there is, just in your experience, your hunch on the issue, I'm curious if you think more folks come to the design engineering role from a design background or from an engineering background. Do you think that there is a more clear path for one or the other?
I don't know. I really should have asked more people about what their like educational background was in. Not that I'm like somebody who likes to gatekeep from having education or not or anything, but like more to do with like that would be a clearer indication of their origin of like how they got to that point. And that's through like me coming from a design background of like I said about my degree and my college and experience and stuff, and my career as well, starting as a designer. So it felt like more designers were like that. Then again, I think it seemed quite balanced. Like people had done lots of engineering, but like really wanted to get into the involvement of like the design part. So I didn't really see like a clear side, and I didn't even see like a clear position that would be most beneficial to get you there. I don't think there's like a, if you come from this angle, you'll definitely get to it. Like it's any side or any angle.
Yeah, I wonder if my perspective might be a little bit tainted by an overlap with maybe the full stack engineer. So someone that calls themselves full stack might think of themselves as sort of a front end and a back end at the same time, but it's typically more back end than front end when people say full stack. I don't know that I would see more folks calling themselves a front or a full stack engineer to a design engineer. I don't know if I see a lot of that happening, but that's just my hunch on the issue.
It sounds like some folks sort of push back on calling the role engineer. Why would somebody have an issue with that?
Well, engineer is like kind of, like we talked about before with like a structural engineer is something that like requires like thorough experience and like certification, because these buildings tend to have people in them, and those buildings need to stay up and keep people safe and like do all sorts of other things as well. And that's very like officialized or like formal. So I totally understand that pushback, and there was Charlie who replied. She said about the in an ideal world we would change these roles so much, but like the way that we've kind of come to this conclusion after like 20 odd years of like all the evolution of like job titles and stuff, we've just ended up with microphone. We've ended up with these kinds of like titles, and like development has like claimed engineer as well as like all these other types of like titles and positions that like it's just something we can't really like undo now.
Right.
Maybe we can like later on, but like I do understand, after like speaking to a few people, I do understand that kind of worry that like it waters down the title and like the position, because we need to have clarity on that. But at the same time, I don't want to pull the ladder up. I don't want to like I don't want to gatekeep like from people being qualified to do the work that they have got experience in.
Do you get the sense that title helps to build credibility maybe with the development teams?
Yeah, I do. I think and funnily enough, engineer, it just the word engineer, like that has a level of credibility in other spaces, like electrical engineering, and like I said before, structural engineering, or like engineering to do with aerospace and stuff like that. That like those have like incredible like credibility as well. And like, not to say that like web development and application development is like or less valuable or less difficult or anything. It's just it's been stretched into a thing. If we had more naming conventions in that space, then maybe we wouldn't have overlapped into it. It's just we've kind of incorporated those to, like, for lack of better terminology, but at least we don't have like titles like webmaster and things like that. Like,
Right.
some of those sound a bit too like wizardry or like tainted, shall we say.
Very curious about the term engineer in terms of certification and how it sort of overlaps between, because I think a good argument could be made that software can be just as dangerous as some of these other disciplines in terms of writing bad software can be a very dangerous thing for people in the real world. And I'm wondering if you think that, I mean, you sort of mentioned that there are certifications for these other disciplines. Do you think that it would be better to have a formal like software certification for some roles that exist like that?
That's an interesting thought. Like, I feel really bad because I'm not being very decisive in my answers. Like, I'm not like putting a line in the sand, but like I'm very open to like stuff. I'm not going to like proclaim like what right and wrong is, but like, certifications and that people have the opportunity to have a card that says I did this and I earned this and I made this. That's great. That's like, I'm very privileged to have a degree that I can like flash at people. Not that I've really had to in my career. Again, an adjacent like privilege, but like having that degree is like quite a powerful thing. Like, it may be more powerful back in the day. My dad used to say that like if you have a degree, you can walk into anywhere and get a job, and like that was
Well,
that
that
was the
used to be
90s.
true.
Yeah, that used to be true, like in the 80s and 90s, like maybe, but like now it's a different game. But it's like it
Yeah.
still holds weight, and like and this actually relates to like a topic that I am like personally interested in, like kind of related to my wife's line of work is actually a copywriter. She's like she does content writing and copywriting and stuff like that. And one of the things that really winds me up about that industry or an adjacent industries to it is that it's undervalued. Like, it is just, I find it kind of ridiculous that my wife will work just as hard as I will and write wonderful content, interesting topics, and really drill research and all that kind of stuff, and not make the same as what I do, writing 5 lines of code in like a god awful bit of Node.js of some kind. And like, I'm not devaluing it, but I'm just saying that like content is not like valued enough, and like it should be more. And like, I guess that goes back to like the qualification thing, that like if we're going to have it, we should make sure it's valued, and we should also make it as an inclusive opportunity as possible. Because when I went to university, there wasn't like very much web development. Like, there wasn't a web development course. But I mean, you probably agree with me, Zach. There's so much stuff in web development that you could train for 3 years on it. You could do a master's in it easy.
So had you done web development before you entered, or you made that sort of educational choice about what you wanted to go into?
Yeah, I guess web kind of like popped its head up in like my education, like at college. I still have printouts of my websites that I made at college. I don't have the files, but I have the printouts. And then I did it again at university, like build your own website and a bit of Flash and all that kind of stuff. And then like it just popped its head back up again when someone said about WordPress and stuff in my career.
Yeah, I'm just curious if, because there was sort of a lack of formal web development education opportunity when you were in school, if you chose to go down the design path because that was the closest overlap, or...
Yeah. So it kind of came about because um, when I was at college, I just really wanted to like get into games. Like I wanted to do
Ah,
like concept art for games, and I used to
Mm.
do lots of illustration stuff and lots of like Photoshop illustration stuff and things like that. And I tried to like emulate styles from like really cool like illustrators and stuff. And I knew I wanted to get into that. And then as time went on, like I just kind of learned a bit of everything, and like eventually like code kind of turned up as an opportunity to say, right, well, if you can design it, you can actually build it, and then it'll be on a page, and then you've done it, you've finished it, that's yours now. And like it must have got me like subconsciously. And like and then the whole like WordPress thing and Tumblr stuff and all those kinds of things in my career, like another stepping stone into like, oh, you can make anything now, Dave, and you can make something and put it on the internet, and that's it, it's done.
The
for better
internet
or for worse.
is magic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Better for me, worse for viewers.
I don't know quite what the right way to put it would be, but maybe, I don't know, the democratization, I don't know if that's the right word, of things in general. I actually, this is probably a bit of a side conversation, but I think it relates. I was talking to my 16-year-old daughter yesterday, and she was saying, "Oh, there's these YouTubers that I like. They're going to go do like a live show that I want to go see." And I was like, wow, it's so interesting, like how entertainment has changed. And I guess the point is that in the good old days, there used to be gatekeepers, right? In
Mm.
terms of like, and I was trying to explain to her, and of course I sound like an old guy, but the idea being that there used to be all of these gatekeepers, say in entertainment or publishing or in academia or whatever. Let's say you have like a publishing company. It's not like anybody could write a book. You have to have credibility. You have to say, okay, I went to university, I have a PhD, and they say, okay, well, you have an interesting point of view on this and you're clearly educated, so therefore yes, you can write a book. Same thing goes with lots of different kinds of media. I love that we're living in an age where if someone has something to say, they can publish something and get it out to the world, which is just
Yeah.
amazing. And yet, um, it sort of oversaturates these like markets or whatever.
Policing it doesn't really like stop like the systemic like problems. Like how did people get to that point of which they had to do something like that? That
Right.
like there are services and routes that like help people prevent getting to that stage. Like, and in the same way for like education and like people's ability to like get into the roles that they get into the careers they want to get into, we have to like catch them early and like give them the opportunities early and like
Mm-hmm.
find those entry points for those interests. um like and the web itself is almost like was like a rebellious bypass of like those
Yeah.
gatekeeping kind of perceptions, and it's broken down so many like barriers,
Mm-hmm.
not only in terms of like our industry of like building websites and creating them and all that kind of stuff, but even like YouTubers and that and creating
Mm-hmm.
content online. Like I watch so many YouTubers, like they make
Yeah.
some great stuff. It's like watching a super niche blog post. Like it's
Right.
so good.
Actually, after I gave that whole spiel, maybe the tie-in is that, yeah, there used to be all these things that were sort of gatekeeping, and my point to my daughter was like, back in the day, entertainment had its gatekeepers too. You had television networks, you had movie studios and things like that. And now all those barriers are gone. People can just
Mm.
create all this niche content. And entertainment, that's one thing. But in another sense, you have folks that are like total hacks saying, like, well, I'm a doctor. And because they have like a slick YouTube channel and something interesting to say, it's like, well, no, you're not actually a doctor. You just have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. It comes with good and bad. It's such an interesting time that we're in.
It does, and this these roles like design engineer and things like that are almost kind of a call back to that gatekeeping space of like, well, the only way I'm going to get into this space is by using design engineer or the word engineer to shield myself from any like people that doubt you, like doubt your ability and stuff like that, which is a shame, but like this is the world we like live in. Like it would be nice if interview processes weren't so grueling, shall we say.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you think that there is value in sort of iterating on these job titles every 5 or 10 years to make them seem fresh and new, even though the role might be very similar to maybe the past iteration.
I suppose it's a bit of a risk. Like I watched a really nerdy video about VHS tapes, and somebody was like, they were keeping hold of their VHS tapes to like convert them to digital. And every time they did that, because they would get better and better technology each time, but every time they did that, that VHS tape would get worse. So there was almost this weird like compromise between like, oh, but I recorded it in 1080 now, but the picture quality was like deteriorating because of the playback, the amount of playbacks. No. So like almost like the same with these titles, that like the regurgitation and the reformatting of them every time is like they will lose like value anyway, just even if they get more and more accurate. That like the weird way we iterate it, like it tends to end up like watering down stuff, and then in 10 years time we end up with the same kind of ridiculous titles that we had for like all sorts of other I think Chief Happiness Officer comes to mind, but like at the same time, like I would like to be happy, so
sure.
Why can't we? I would like some happiness. Yes, please. Yeah.
It's not so bad. Yeah.
So Dave, you have been you're well known in the design system space. I've been working on a lot of great design systems over the years. And we've been getting lots of new web platform features to facilitate that work as well. Web components, CSS variables, container queries. How do you see sort of designers and developers bridging the gap in the middle, and how the web platform might play a role in that, and smoothing that transition forward?
Well, first, thanks. I I didn't realize.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was in that space so much. I just like to share stuff. But the more I think about and the more I see stuff in like design systems, like I've been privileged not only like to work on them, but like to observe other ones in like other companies, like with my role, and web components is becoming more and more of like a kind of first choice, or like a logical choice in like a design system. Like if a company was to come to me and like I didn't know any of their stack or anything, I would say web components. Like, I mean, for some companies it might not be appropriate, like depending on what their common stacks are, but like that technology is getting better and better each time, and not only that, it's built into the browser in many ways. Yes, it has its caveats, and like it needs to grow more. I think you would agree as well, Zach, like from your talks and stuff, that like there needs to be more ability to reuse web components and like be more dry, as I kind of perceive it as. But like, again, CSS variables and like frameworks out there to help you get there, like lit, like I'm a big fan of lit. Those technologies are helping to like polyfill for some of those areas, and even 11t itself like polyfills for some of those aspects of like reusability and like not having such a dependence on JavaScript. Right? I like web components, but I don't like using tons of JavaScript and like relying upon it. I'm keen to see how it grows, and like it's a slow one, but it's going to get there. I think it will become more of a thing, and it is becoming more of a thing. Like, even for just embeddable tools, like, it's pretty good. Instead of an iframe, it's pretty powerful. So yeah, I'm keen to see what it would do. I mean, I didn't really answer your question on like how it would relate to design and stuff like that. But I think it would help like clear the path. I think it would get rid of the weeds that are in the way for like developers, so they can act more precisely in achieving their designs. And I've personally experienced that.
Yeah, I'm curious how much overlap you see between the title design engineer and working in the design system space. Is it like a Venn diagram circle situation, or is there nuances in which you might have a little bit of design systems that are outside of design engineer purview? Yeah, what's the overlap there?
I think there's an incredible amount of overlap. Like the concentric circle seems quite kind of close. Like there is a lot of like overlap there. But there is more commonality with like designers spawning the design system as opposed to developers, which it's great. It's great to have a design system get kind of built up, especially out of a need, like especially in a space that like, or in a company that needs that consistency, or needs to help with efficiencies and stuff like that. But I do think it's important for design systems to be born from like both a design and development perspective, and have those voices in the decision making process, because everybody in that space, everybody who would be in that meeting, are all walking towards the same path, like all walking towards the same like result. Like designers want to create consistency and consolidate things and refactor design basically, and developers are doing the same thing. Like if they want to like package stuff up and reuse things and refactor things, then a design system is going to do that for both design and development. So I think it's important for like people who are looking to do it now, like to have both says in that matter.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to working with designers and engineers simultaneously, I'm curious if you see the role of your design system, or how do you interpret people moving outside of the design system, and how do you bring them back into the fold of working with the design system? Are you more of a carrot person, where you sort of give them the incentive to follow the rules that have been laid out by the design system, or are you more of a stick person, where you find the folks that are misusing the design system, or maybe using like one-off copies of individual components slightly tweaked, and then punishing those folks? Which do you see has more value?
So as being an advocate in the past, and as well as a developer in like design and in design systems, is that advocating and finding advocates is super important and super powerful. That like if you can find because it's in marketing, like you find advocates, you find people that will promote the product for you and like share that knowledge with others, then you're going to find more people, and you're going to find more powerful people that like can use that design system as a force to be reckoned with. Whereas like kind of nudging people and being a nagging person, you start to kind of end up with that perception that like it is an enforced like, oh, you have to do it type thing. That like if you can create a level of like FOMO, then like it's gonna kind of self fulfill that destiny. And I found that like we would make tons of examples and share tons of like demos and things like that when we were working directly on design systems, and like creating like, oh, you want to make this, or well, you could do it like this, like you could like, here you go, here's a thing like this, and here's the thing like that, and we would incorporate them all the time. That like the opportunity to not only just use the design system, but to make with the design system is like you're gonna create fans like within the company, or you hope so. You hope to do.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great perspective, because I really do think that mindset applies to everything. Like whether it is you're running an open source community online, or you're just trying to advocate for the web platform generally, or web components generally as part of the web platform. Yeah, I really like that perspective on how to build a good community around whatever you're trying to advocate for.
Do you sense that companies are getting better about helping that relationship along between designers and developers, or are we still sort of in the throw it over the wall once we get a project to a certain place? Or do you sense companies are helping to foster better communication and a better working relationship?
I think it is getting better, but I still think there's like a waterfall process like happening, and like maybe for some companies that still works and they're still quite happy to do that. But
Yeah.
like, even when you throw like just responsive design into the mix, that like that waterfall kind of falls apart. Like you can't swim upstream to that and say, oh hey, like this is wrapping and not quite what you expect. Like we need to kind of find a middle ground. Or the developer ends up designing a bunch of like resized views that like this is all the, I'm gonna have to pull out my design expertise and say, right, this layout needs to change from like 2 columns to 5, or I don't know, down to 2 or down to 3 or something. So I still think we need to get there, but I do think it's improving. And one of the difficulties, like for design systems people, is just like making sure that they expose like the value. Like it's quite hard to be in that space and like ensure the value is like seen and understood. But I think it's getting better. I think we're getting towards where we need to be, or where we would like to be.
Yeah, it makes me think. Thinking back to it goes back 10 years. I was working for an analytics consultancy, and we were doing this big website refresh, and I was in charge of writing a good bit of the copy. And I can't remember what came up, but I was working with the guy that was building the site, and I don't think this was coming from him, but there was sort of a sentiment at some point where it was like, okay, we've sort of framed out what the site's going to look like, and here's the lorem ipsum copy here, and and myself and another writer were like, no. We need to communicate like what this is about first, and that's going to help to, and of course, you need to have a little back and forth on this, but as a writer, from my perspective, it was like, we're communicating what this thing is, and then the design comes to sort of serve what that communication is,
Yeah.
And so it was like this breakdown, and I noticed this over and over again, especially now that, like, going back to what you said about your wife, like being a copywriter, like sometimes it's these certain disciplines can get kind of taken for granted or undervalued, and it's kind of a problem across like different teams and industries, where we need to figure out how to work better together, and there's value to each, but sometimes you need to negotiate, sometimes what comes first and what you're building off of. And it's just interesting how these things sort of go across industries and teams and disciplines,
Definitely.
Yeah, that sort of brought to mind for me just the idea that a design engineer sort of exists in that space between the fidelity of your prototype or the fidelity of your design and seeing it like implemented on the web, and your design system can like help facilitate some of that process as well. I'm curious if you ever see, like, in a any possible future, if design tools will ever be good enough that it almost steals a lot of the thunder of the design engineer. If you ever think we'll get to a space where the designer can basically, using their design tools, whatever it might be, Figma, whatever, they can create a prototype so high fidelity that we almost don't need that gap to be bridged. between the prototype and the solution. Do you think design tools will ever get to that place?
All of those kinds of hallmarks of a good and well-made site. As we get closer and closer, like it's going to get better and better. It isn't going to be beyond the pale that Figma will allow options to like say, what component does this mean? Is this an article? Is this a section? Is this a heading? Like what level is this heading? And inferring meaning to those will then produce like good semantics, and we'll get closer and closer. It would be, I guess it would be probably a bit too naive to be stubborn enough to say, oh, we will always be needed. No, not necessarily. It may already be like happening a little bit way now, like print. That's the one that jumps to mind. Print is kind of becoming more like niche, and I'm kind of cool with that because I did plenty of print like design back in the day, like in my first years of like my career, and like we were cranking out so much like low quality stuff, and it seemed almost like wasteful that like, you know, maybe these things become a little bit more like niche and tinkery and like hobbyist and stuff, and like when we come to do the big beefy work, that we have these nice tools to like help us get the job done, that like, you know, so we can clock off at 5:30 and live our lives and not have to like learn every hour of the day and like have to like keep on top of it. That like these tools help us to get the work done, so you work to live, you don't live to work.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious because I almost see it in terms of Figma's trying to come at it from the design perspective, is trying to squeeze the design engineer from the design perspective, and AI tools are trying to squeeze the UX engineer, the design engineer from the code perspective. And I genuinely don't know what's going to happen, but design engineers are getting squeezed from both sides by different tools and different companies. So it's maybe not the most optimistic perspective, but I do just feel like there's going to be value moving forward, because there's always there's just an incredible bounty of terrible websites on the web right now.
Yeah.
And no matter how good the tools get, there's always going to be space for high quality product.
Dave, if you had to rename design engineer, what would you call it?
Web developer.
Fair enough.
Web developer, like, you know, like like we were all that like underneath in some way, like, you know, like there's designers out there who know a bit of code. Web developer, you make stuff for the web, like, you know, web creator, something like that, something, because something more like modest.
Sure. Yep, that makes total sense. Dave, thanks so much for taking some time today. And for folks that are interested in your work, where can they check you out online?
You can check me out. My website is darn.es, so that's darn.es. And then I also have this like adjacent blog that I've been doing like extra design system articles, and that's designsystems.wtf. This is a project that I did with the folks at Zero Height, and they've kindly allowed me to kind of keep it going as like a side project type of thing. So I'll be blogging and doing newsletter stuff there.
Oh, I guess one more question. If somebody's really itching to do the Dave Darns call out, is there an 800 number they could call and do a recording? Or
well, if you
taking
go down
auditions?
I mean, if you go down to the form, the contact form at the bottom, there might be a way to submit a file, and that file might allow you to be played back using the technology that is web components.
Nice. I don't know if they're gonna beat Zach's, but you know, we're.
I'm gonna. Yeah. Do you accept .exe files?
Yeah.
A couple from
DirectX.
LimeWare that I can send to you.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, I'd say that is about a wrap for this episode of Podcast Awesome. Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to Dave Darnes and to Zach Leatherman for joining us on the pod. So maybe the key takeaway is that job titles might matter, but whether you call yourself a design engineer, UX developer, or somebody who just makes cool stuff, it's really about the end result on the things that you're creating, right? Really, the key is collaborating with your team, your adaptability, and not taking yourself too seriously. If you want to learn a little bit more about what Dave's up to, I've left information in the show notes that you can check out, including all of his socials and some website stuff. And if you enjoyed this episode of Podcast Awesome, pass it on to a friend. Why not? Podcast Awesome was produced and edited by this guy. And with the video versions of the podcast, we get a little extra help from Isaac Chase. The Podcast Awesome theme song was composed by Ronnie Martin. The music interstitials were done by Zach Malm. And the audio mastering was done by Chris Enns at Lemon Productions.